The attic was thick with dust and silence, the kind of silence that only houses with too many memories could carry. Claire Everly pulled down the creaky wooden ladder, her fingertips brushing against cobwebs as she climbed into the dimly lit space above her childhood home. She hadn't been up here in years, not since her mother's funeral 9 months ago. It was Mother's Day, and while her friends posted cheerful brunch photos and heartfelt tributes, Claire had driven back to the old house in Evergreen Hollow alone, desperate for connection. She told herself she was just cleaning, maybe sorting through the last of her mother's things. But deep down, she was looking for something, anything, to make her feel close to her mother again. Sunlight filtered in through a small attic window, catching dust motes that floated like ghosts. Claire opened an old cedar chest she barely remembered. Inside were time-worn quilts, yellowed greeting cards, faded Polaroids, and a leather-bound book, its edges frayed and clasp rusted shut. Her breath caught. The initials M.E. were pressed into the soft leather. Margaret Everly, her mother. Claire sat cross-legged on the attic floor, the book trembling slightly in her hands. She undid the clasp with a quiet click and opened the diary, expecting maternal warmth. Perhaps old thoughts about baby Claire, birthday plans, or wistful reflections on love and motherhood. Instead, the first entry read like a confession. I never meant to fall in love with him, but how could I not? He was everything your father wasn't, and he gave me something I could never tell anyone about. Not even you. Claire's pulse quickened. She turned the page, then another. The entries grew darker, layered with secrecy and pain. There were mentions of nights spent away from home, a hidden rendezvous, and a terrible decision made for the good of everyone involved. Names were scribbled out. Dates were inconsistent. Somewhere between disbelief and dread, Claire realized this wasn't a journal. It was a map of buried truths. And the mother she thought she knew, the selfless nurse, the kind woman who raised her alone after her father's death, had been living a double life. Her hands trembled as she flipped another page. In the margins, almost as an afterthought, her mother had written, "If Claire ever finds this, I'm sorry. You were never supposed to know." A chill ran down Claire's spine. Downstairs, the clock chimed noon. Mother's Day. Claire closed the diary slowly, but the questions had already been unleashed, and they weren't going back into the box. Whatever her mother had hidden, Claire was going to uncover it, no matter what it cost. Claire sat at the kitchen table long after the sun had dipped behind the trees. The diary spread open before her like a crime scene. Her fingertips hovered above the page that changed everything. Where her mother first mentioned T, she hadn't written his full name, only initials and phrases drenched in guilt. T held my hand as if the world would fall apart without me. T said we were safe, that no one would suspect what we were doing. It wasn't until Claire turned another page and read a chillingly familiar line, "He looked at you the way a father would, even though he wasn't supposed to," that her stomach dropped. Dr. Thomas Hale, her godfather. The man who used to bring her peppermint candies after her dentist appointments. The one who taught her how to ride a bike while her mother nervously watched from the porch. The man who cried at her high school graduation and gave a toast at her college send-off. He had always been there, steady and warm, like family. But now Claire saw his closeness through a darker lens. His devotion to her mother. The lingering glances. The private smiles exchanged when they thought no one was looking. She remembered the way he used to place his hand gently on her mother's back, fingers curling just slightly too long. She felt sick. Had everyone known but her? Claire's fingers gripped the edge of the diary as she reread one damning line over and over. The timing doesn't lie. Claire might be his. The air left her lungs. Her father, James Everly, had died when Claire was just a toddler. All she knew of him came from faded photographs and carefully curated stories. He was noble, kind, quiet. Her mother had always spoken of him with deep affection, but rarely detail. And now Claire understood why. The man she'd been mourning all her life might not even be her father. She needed answers. But who could she trust? Her mother was gone. Her Aunt Vivian had disappeared from the family decades ago, and Dr. Hale, Tom, was still very much alive. Claire reached for her phone, her hands still trembling. She hesitated, staring at his contact photo. He was smiling in it, an old picture from her med school white coat ceremony, a moment she once cherished. But now, she couldn't tell if that smile was paternal or something else entirely. She didn't call him. Not yet. Instead, she whispered aloud into the quiet kitchen, as if her mother might hear her through the veil of time. "What did you do?" Claire hadn't slept. The diary remained at her bedside, as though it might try to vanish if left unattended. She found herself waking at odd hours, rereading cryptic passages, parsing every word like a detective dissecting a coded confession. It was in the middle of one such sleepless night, under the hum of a flickering lamp, that she noticed something she had missed before, a single page folded inward at the corner, almost as if it were meant to be skipped. She hesitated and unfolded it. There was a second time. "I should have told someone. But how could I, after what Vivian and I did?" Claire's breath caught. The entry was sparse, erratic. Her mother's handwriting, normally so fluid and graceful, trembled across the page. "The baby came too soon. And too quietly. We didn't go to the hospital. Vivian said she'd take care of it. She promised. I didn't ask where. I couldn't. I just let her." Claire stared at the words, her chest tightening. A second baby? She flipped through the surrounding pages, desperate for context, but all she found were broken thoughts. They said it was safer this way. No records. Vivian made a deal. I wasn't strong enough to stop her. I hear crying in my dreams. Each line chipped away at the image of the mother Claire thought she knew. A nurse. A caretaker. A protector. How could that same woman let a child vanish without a trace? The mention of Vivian, her estranged aunt, sent Claire spiraling back to a childhood shaped by silence. Her mother never spoke of her sister. Claire had grown up believing Vivian was simply gone, a ghost from her mother's past. But now, that absence felt deliberate, engineered. And the question that haunted Claire most: what happened to that child? Had the baby died? Been given away? Was she living somewhere under another name, oblivious to who she truly was? Claire closed the diary and pressed her palm against its cover, heart racing. She had to find Vivian. If the baby lived, she deserved to know. And if not, Claire needed to know why. Claire stood outside the faded gray house at the edge of Briar Hollow, staring at the cracked window panes and ivy-choked walls. The address had come from a half-forgotten letter she'd found tucked inside the diary, a return address scrawled in the margin of a holiday card from decades ago, signed Viv. Her mother had never spoken of Vivian beyond a single warning. Some people are poison, even if they share your blood. Still, Claire knocked. The woman who opened the door was thin, brittle-looking, with a hard-set jaw and steel-gray hair swept into a knot. But her eyes, those eyes, mirrored Claire's own. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "You look just like her," Vivian said, voice flat. Inside, the house smelled of mothballs and decaying books. Lace curtains hung in yellow tatters. An untouched tea set sat on a side table, layered in dust, as if time had simply stopped. Claire's questions poured out before her coat was off. "I know about the baby," she said. "The one you and my mother." Vivian's expression flickered. Pain, then fury. "That was never supposed to come back," she hissed. "She swore she'd burn those pages." Claire's stomach dropped. "So it's true?" Vivian paced, fingers trembling. "Your mother was in over her head. She didn't want another child. She didn't want that child. Not the way she wanted you." Her voice cracked on the last word. Claire's voice was a whisper. "So you took the baby?" "I protected her," Vivian snapped. "From shame. From your father. From the gossip. We made a deal. Your mother and I." She kept the perfect life, the white picket fence, the saintly reputation. "And I took the burden." Claire's mind reeled. "Where did she go? Where is she now?" Vivian's gaze darkened. "I don't know anymore. Things changed. Promises were broken. People lied. And then someone made the baby disappear." Claire froze. What do you mean disappear? Vivian turned away. There were forged documents. People paid to keep mouths shut. Someone wanted her gone for good. I only helped deliver her into the world. I didn't realize I was delivering her into silence. Silence fell between them. Claire looked around the room again. The peeling wallpaper, the dusty photographs turned face down on mantels. A lifetime of secrets, stacked like bones beneath the floorboards. Then she noticed it. A photograph tucked beneath a doily. A baby girl swaddled in floral blankets. No date, no name. Vivian noticed too, and snatched it away. Claire rose. I'm going to find her. Vivian met her eyes. Be careful, she said coldly. The people who erased that child from history, they're still watching. The Everly home had always felt safe. Even after her mother's death, Claire had clung to its warmth. The scent of lavender that lingered in the linen closet, the ticking grandfather clock that marked time with a gentle chime, the worn steps that creaked just enough to feel familiar. But now, everything about it felt wrong, like the house was watching her. It started with subtle shifts. Drawers left slightly ajar when she knew she'd shut them. The diary moved half an inch from where she'd placed it the night before. She told herself it was exhaustion. Nerves. Maybe she was just being paranoid. Until the night she found the photograph. It had slipped between the pages of the diary, one she knew hadn't been there before. A black and white snapshot of her mother holding a bundled newborn in a hospital gown. Her smile was faint, forced. And behind her, half shrouded in shadow, stood a man Claire didn't recognize. But the edges of the photo had been smeared. Ink blotted out part of the date. Someone had tried to erase it. Claire's blood ran cold. She bought a small nanny cam the next morning, disguised as an old-fashioned clock, and placed it on the bookshelf near her bed. If someone was coming into the house, into her room, she needed to know. 2 nights passed, nothing. On the 3rd, the feed cut out for precisely 7 minutes at 2:12 a.m. When it resumed, the diary had been moved. Pages she'd bookmarked were now turned. The photograph? Gone. She checked the footage frame by frame, heart pounding, only to find static where answers should have been. Someone had been there. Claire changed the locks the next day, installed a second camera near the back door, and started sleeping with the diary under her pillow. But even then, she couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. She'd catch glimpses in the hallway mirror, a shape disappearing down the stairwell, hear faint footsteps overhead while lying awake in bed. The house, once her sanctuary, had become a haunted maze. But it wasn't ghosts that haunted her now. It was the knowledge that someone was desperate to keep the truth hidden, and close enough to rewrite it. As she reread the diary, Claire noticed small discrepancies. Words crossed out. Sentences rewritten in ink shades just barely off. What if the entries weren't just fading from age? What if someone was tampering with them? Claire wrote down every page, every passage, creating a copy in her own hand. The next morning, one of her transcribed pages was missing. She wasn't just being watched. She was being warned. Claire's hands trembled as she held the letter, the ink smeared in places where she had gripped it too tightly. A DNA test. It wasn't her idea at first, more like a distant whisper of suggestion from the few people she'd confided in, people who had warned her about seeking too much truth. But here she was, standing in her mother's old kitchen with the sealed envelope in front of her. The results were already confirmed, stamped with the cold finality of science. She was not an only child. The match was clear. A woman named Elise, living in Briar Hollow, the same town Claire had called home for years. The same town where her mother had grown up. The same town that now felt like an intricate web of secrets, slowly tightening around her neck. The letter included an address and an invitation to meet. Elise was listed as Claire's half-sister. Her stomach churned. A sibling she had never known. A sibling whose existence had been erased. Her mind raced with questions. Was Elise the child from the mysterious pregnancy? Could she be the baby that Vivian had hidden away all those years ago? The worst part? Elise didn't know Claire existed. Claire's fingers hovered above the keys, ready to type a message, but the weight of her own disbelief held her back. How could she even explain all this to someone she'd never met? Someone who probably had a completely different life. an identity built on lies, just like hers. She couldn't wait. Claire set the letter down, pacing around the kitchen, the walls closing in. How long had they been lying to her? How much of her life was built on the ashes of someone else's mistakes? The thought of confronting Elise both terrified and thrilled her. If she truly was her sister, what would that make her mother? What if everything Claire had believed, her identity, her family, was a story concocted in the shadows? There was only one way to find out. She found herself standing on Elise's doorstep before she realized how she'd gotten there. The house was small, modest, but there was something about the way it looked, like it had been lived in carefully, thoughtfully. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Can I help you?" Claire turned to see a woman standing in the doorway, her brown eyes wide with surprise. She was familiar, but in an almost uncanny way, like staring into a mirror that wasn't quite her own, a stranger's reflection. Are you Elise?" Claire's voice was a whisper, fear catching in her throat. The woman blinked, confused. "Yes, I'm Elise. Who are you?" The next words came out of Claire's mouth before she could stop them. "I'm your sister." Claire could hardly catch her breath as she sat across from Frances, the old nurse who had once cared for her mother and seen more of the Everly family's secrets than anyone else. Frances had aged like a portrait left too long in the sun, her hair thin and silver, her face lined with memories she couldn't quite forget. But her eyes? Those eyes were sharp, still holding the weight of decades of silent knowledge. "I need to know what happened," Claire whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "What did my mother and aunt promise each other? What deal did they make?" Frances stirred her tea slowly, eyes darting to the window before settling back on Claire. The room was quiet except for the hum of the clock on the wall, a sound that seemed to echo the tension between them. "You don't know what you're asking, child," Frances finally said, her voice low, almost a hiss. "I have to know," Claire pressed. "I've found pieces of the story, but they don't make sense. Why would they hide a baby? Why would they destroy a life?" Frances sighed, setting her cup down with deliberate slowness. She clasped her hands, the veins in her wrists swollen with age. "Your mother and aunt, they were both strong-willed, but they were also scared, afraid of what might happen if the truth came out, afraid of how the world would look at them. You don't understand what they went through, what your aunt went through especially." Claire leaned forward, her heart pounding in her chest. What did they go through? Frances hesitated, then spoke in a near whisper. "Your mother and aunt made a pact, Claire. They agreed to keep the baby's identity a secret that could never be revealed. Not to anyone, not to you." "What kind of pact?" Claire's voice cracked. "They promised that no matter what happened, no matter who asked, they would never let anyone know the truth about that child, who she really was, who her real parents were. Your mother, she couldn't carry that burden, so your aunt did. Vivian became the one to protect her, to hide her from the world." Claire's mind raced. "But that's not all, is it? There's more. There's something they didn't tell me, something that changed everything." Frances looked away, a cloud of guilt crossing her face. "The baby wasn't just anyone's child," she said, her voice tight. "She wasn't Vivian's, and she wasn't your mother's. That baby was your godfather's." Claire's breath caught in her throat. Dr. Thomas Hale. She'd always considered him a second father, someone who had been in her life for as long as she could remember. His kindness, his calm presence, the way he had always made her feel safe. Now she could see his face in a different light. "Your mother didn't know how to handle it," Frances continued, her voice almost sorrowful. "She didn't know what to do with a child that wasn't hers. And she was afraid, Claire, afraid of losing everything. Her reputation, her family. Your father had to stay in the dark. And so did you." Claire sat back, her head spinning. But why did Vivian agree to hide the truth? Why did she become part of this lie? Frances's eyes darkened, the shadows of old secrets clouding them. "Because she had her own reasons. She loved your mother, Claire. But sometimes love can make people do terrible things. Vivian didn't want to lose her sister, so she kept her promise. But somewhere along the way, she lost herself too." Claire stood up, her mind reeling. She had come to this woman seeking answers, but now she had more questions than ever. There was a web of lies stretching back decades, tangled in ways she couldn't begin to untangle. How much of her life had been a lie? How could her mother, her saintly mother, have kept such a thing from her? "You're asking a dangerous question, Claire," Frances warned, her voice sharp now. "The truth about that baby? It'll cost you more than you can imagine. Some things are buried for a reason. Some things should stay dead." Claire's heart hammered in her chest. "I don't care about the cost. I need to know who I am." Frances rose, her frail body trembling slightly. She touched Claire's arm with a surprisingly strong grip. "Then you'd better be prepared to lose everything." As Claire left the old woman's house, the weight of her mother's and aunt's pact hung heavily on her shoulders. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, but Claire had to wonder, was she ready to face what she might find? The old house felt colder now, as though the walls were closing in around Claire. She could hear the creaks of the floorboards at night, and the whistling wind outside seemed to carry whispers, taunting her, as though even the house knew the secrets it held. Claire had no choice but to confront what was staring her in the face. The diary was being tampered with. Someone was deliberately rewriting history. Her mother's words, those words that had once comforted her, that had felt like a connection to a woman she'd lost, now felt poisoned. As Claire carefully flipped through the pages, her fingers froze on a passage she had just read the night before. The ink was darker now. The sentences, too neat, too perfect, almost too new. Someone had crossed out entire paragraphs and replaced them with more polished, coherent ones. But the rhythm was wrong. The handwriting was different. She could tell. She knew her mother's handwriting better than anyone. This wasn't her mother's voice. Claire felt the blood drain from her face. She went through the entries with increasing dread, noticing more changes, pages torn out and carefully replaced with copies. The inconsistencies were becoming too obvious to ignore. Her fingers trembled as she recalled the entries she had read before. The pregnancy, the affair with Dr. Thomas Hale, the mysterious disappearance of a child that no one seemed to remember. How had it all changed so suddenly? Someone was trying to erase the truth. But why? It couldn't have been her aunt, could it? Vivian had always been the one to keep secrets, but she was no writer. No, someone far more careful was involved in these alterations. Claire traced the date on one of the newly rewritten entries, the ink still fresh, March 12, 1983, the day her mother had supposedly revealed everything to her in one last desperate plea. But the paragraph now read differently. The emotion was drained from the words. Where once there had been raw, painful confession, there was now an indifferent recounting of events, almost as if someone had sanitized it to make her mother appear less guilty. A chill ran down her spine. Whoever was altering the pages knew too much about her mother's life, about her life. They knew what to change, what to erase, what would make Claire believe the lies. Claire took a deep breath, steadying herself. She needed to be careful. Whoever was doing this was closer than she realized. Someone in the family, or even closer. It could be Dr. Hale himself, though the thought of him doing something so sinister unsettled her. No, he couldn't have. Could he? The diary had become a battleground, a place where history itself was being rewritten, and Claire was caught in the middle. What was the truth now? What had been erased? Desperation clawed at her. She couldn't let this go on. She couldn't let someone twist her mother's words any longer. Claire decided it was time to confront the one person who might have the answers, her father. He had always been the quiet one, the man who worked long hours at the family business and rarely spoke of the past. But there was something off about him now. A distance in his eyes when she mentioned her mother, an unease when she brought up the diary. He knew more than he was letting on. As she prepared to face him, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Her heart skipped as she read the short, cryptic text. "You're looking in the wrong place." She couldn't help but wonder if the person who had been altering the diary had just tipped their hand. Someone was watching her, someone who knew she was getting too close to the truth, and Claire was ready to follow it, no matter where it led. The voicemail was chilling, a hollow whisper from the past. Claire had nearly forgotten about the old, disconnected phone number she'd found in one of her mother's personal belongings. At first, she had dismissed it as a relic of her mother's life before Claire was born, a number from a time when things were simpler, when the woman Claire thought she knew was still just a young woman with no idea of the betrayals that would shadow her. But something about that number, something about the way it appeared on a forgotten scrap of paper, gnawed at her. It wasn't just any number. It was a number her mother had kept hidden, a number she had called often, and once, perhaps too desperately, Claire had decided to call it. The phone rang 3 times, and just when she was about to hang up, the line clicked. A garbled electronic noise followed before a distorted voice came through the static. "It's time, Claire." Her heart stopped. "You're close, aren't you? Close to understanding. The truth will be there if you want it, but you need to be careful. They don't want you to find it." The voice faltered as if the speaker were struggling, trying to force their words through a cloud of interference. And then, click. Nothing. The call ended, but the lingering unease remained. Claire stared at the phone, the mystery thickening with each second. Who had that been? Was it the same person who'd been altering the diary? Or was it someone else entirely? Whoever it was, they knew exactly what Claire had been uncovering. More importantly, they knew what was at stake. She couldn't shake the feeling that the phone call was a warning to stay away, to stop digging. But Claire wasn't the kind of person who backed down from a challenge. She had come too far now to let someone scare her into silence. Her mind raced, and without a second thought, Claire packed a bag and headed for the storage unit her mother had left behind. It was one of the few places Claire had yet to explore. Her mother had made arrangements for it, paying for months of storage before she passed. Claire had avoided it, thinking it was just another pile of forgotten things, but now it felt different. This was the place where the real secrets were buried, where the answers Claire so desperately needed could finally be found. The night was heavy with the scent of rain. As Claire drove to the storage facility, the fluorescent lights flickered as she pulled up to the row of metal units, their cold, lifeless doors standing like silent sentinels. She walked quickly, her footsteps echoing in the stillness, until she reached the unit her mother had rented. The lock was still there, unchanged, but something felt off. The faint scent of something older, something mustier, lingered in the air. Claire hesitated only a moment before unlocking the door and stepping inside. The space was small, cramped with boxes and old furniture. It smelled faintly of dust and time, but what caught her attention was the stack of journals sitting atop a wooden crate in the far corner. Her mother's journals. The real ones. These weren't the pristine, altered pages she had been finding in the house. These were the raw, unedited, uncensored accounts of her mother's life, the ones that had been kept from her. She grabbed the first journal, her hands trembling as she opened it. The first entry hit her like a punch to the gut. It was her mother, raw and unfiltered, describing the events that had shaped Claire's life without her even knowing. The affair, the secret pregnancy, the baby that was never meant to be born. There were details here, ugly, painful truths that Claire had never imagined. But as she read on, something else caught her eye. The ink didn't match. Some of the words seemed too perfect, too precise. And when Claire flipped a few pages, she found it. The same handwriting from the altered diary. Someone had been here. Someone had been reading these journals too. Claire's pulse quickened. She had thought the tampered diary was the only record of her mother's life. But these journals were the key. They were the truth her mother had tried to protect her from. She looked around the storage unit, her breath shallow, the weight of what she had just uncovered crashing over her. If someone had been inside this unit, someone had been tampering with more than just the diary. Claire reached into her bag, pulling out her phone, and snapped pictures of the journals, the contents now irrevocably tainted by the knowledge that someone had altered them. Just as she was about to turn away, a noise from the far corner of the unit caught her attention, the sound of footsteps. Someone was inside with her. Claire's heart skipped as she spun around, but all she saw was a shadow moving quickly across the dimly lit storage space. The figure was too fast, too elusive for her to catch, and before she could react, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. She was locked in. The air in the family estate was thick with tension, as Claire stood in the grand foyer, the place that had once felt like home, but now felt like a prison. Every corner of the house seemed to watch her, as if the very walls were conspiring against her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the figure standing at the top of the staircase. The man she had called father for nearly 30 years. This was it, the moment of truth. Claire had pieced together enough of her mother's hidden past, her aunt's cryptic words, and the altered diaries to know there were no more lies left to unravel, only one final, earth-shattering truth. Her father's face, once a familiar comfort, now appeared distant, almost haunted. His eyes, filled with an unease she had never seen before, met hers with an almost apologetic expression. The silence between them was suffocating. "I need you to tell me everything." Claire's voice wavered, but she held firm. "You've kept this family in the dark long enough. It's time for the truth." He took a step down, his posture stiff, his lips parted as if to speak, but the words faltered, caught somewhere between guilt and fear. Claire could feel her pulse quicken as she waited for him to shatter the illusion of the man who had raised her. "You're right," he said, his voice hollow. "There are things about our family that you don't understand, things I've tried to protect you from." "What do you mean, protect me?" "All these years you've lied to me. You've kept me in the dark about my own mother, about who I really am. Tell me the truth now. I'm not a child anymore." Her words hit him like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged and he slowly made his way down the staircase. Claire stood her ground, though her heart threatened to betray her. She could feel it. Something was coming, something that would change everything. He paused in front of her, his face now unreadable. "You're not my daughter, Claire." Her blood ran cold. "What?" He swallowed hard, his expression faltering for just a moment before he locked eyes with her again. "You were switched at birth." Claire blinked, trying to process the weight of his words. Her mind raced as memories flashed through her. Her mother's affectionate smile, her father's firm but loving presence. All of it shattered in an instant. What are you talking about? How is that possible?" He seemed to shrink before her eyes, his whole body sagging with the burden of the truth he had kept locked away for so long. "Your mother and we made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we didn't know. We didn't know until it was too late." "What mistake?" Claire's voice cracked, desperate for an explanation. But the more she heard, the less sense it made. Her father closed his eyes, a look of deep remorse washing over him. "The baby we brought home that night wasn't ours, Claire. We never realized it until years later. We tried to make it right, but the damage was done. He hesitated. "You were never meant to be ours." The world tilted beneath her feet as the enormity of what he said sank in. "So, I'm not even your daughter?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "No," he whispered the word like a confession. "You were meant to be with another family, a family we knew. But there was a complication. Your biological mother, your real mother, was a part of something much darker than you could ever imagine." The pieces were finally falling into place, but Claire couldn't bring herself to accept what was being said. "You let me believe this lie all these years. It wasn't easy, but it was what was best for you." His words were shaky. "We didn't want you to be burdened by the truth." Claire stepped back, feeling the floor beneath her buckle. The life she had known, the woman who had raised her, her whole sense of self, all of it had been a lie. She wasn't the daughter of the woman who had nurtured her. She wasn't even the daughter of the man who had called himself her father. "Who am I then?" she whispered, broken. "Your real mother." Her father paused again, his gaze shifting to the shadows behind him. "Your biological mother was Vivian." Claire's breath hitched in her chest. Vivian, her estranged aunt, the woman she had known only through fleeting moments of coldness, the woman whose name had been linked to all the hidden truths her mother had left behind. The woman whose secrets had stained her own life without Claire even knowing it. "But I thought you said Vivian disappeared." "She didn't disappear, Claire. She was the one who had been hiding. She was the one who tried to bury the truth." The ground beneath Claire felt like it was shifting. The room spun, and for the first time in her life, she didn't recognize the family she had called her own. And then, like a final, cruel twist of fate, her father delivered the last blow. "The person who altered your mother's diary." He looked her in the eye, almost apologetically. "It was me, Claire. I couldn't let you find out." A silence enveloped them, the finality of the words settling into Claire's bones like a heavy weight. The diary, the phone calls, the erased footage, all of it had led her here, to this moment, to the cold, undeniable truth. Everything she thought she knew was gone, and now there was nothing left to lose. With a deep, trembling breath, Claire wiped away the tears that had silently fallen, her heart hardened against the truth. She had been robbed of her past, but this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. She would uncover every last secret. But some things, some people, would never be the same again.